Miami-Dade police, open the door. Go open the door. Go open the door.
Come outside, man. Let me talk to you for a second.
Hold on, put him up there.
Come here. Come outside for a second.
Step out.
Come outside. Come outside.
Step out.
Come outside. Come outside.
Come over here.
Come outside.
Come out. Take a seat right over here.
Come on, see.
I'm like that right there. Sit on the next seat right there.
Sir, take a seat.
What happened? You gotta come with us. Come on, put on some pants.
Come with y'all for what?
I'll explain it to you once you get dressed. Put on some pants.
Let's get on the set. Make it work.
It took you a minute to answer the door. You're sleeping? I got another set.
Remember back in August, Ron DeSantis down in Florida, his voting task force was sent out in strong numbers to go and arrest people for voting, apparently with guns drawn, as we're seeing in this newly released body cam footage. So they decided to carry out and have people come out in their underwear. These folks that are breaking these laws, how dare you? Some of them just did it because they were registering to vote, as we'll see as we go through more of these. But while this was happening, Ron DeSantis was in front of cameras with a bunch of other law enforcement behind him in front of a podium talking about how much of a badass he is. This is happening while they're arresting folks at gunpoint.
The state of Florida has charged and is in the process of arresting 20 individuals across the state for voter fraud. Now, the majority of these people illegally voted in Palm Beach, Broward, and Miami-Dade. These folks voted illegally in this case, and there's going to be other grounds for other prosecutions in the future. They are disqualified from voting because they've been convicted of either murder or sexual assault, and they do not have the right to vote.
They do not have the right to vote. They've been convicted of murder or sexual assault, and they're just thumbing their nose at the law. And as a matter of fact, I guess the guns were necessary. Here's maybe the not reason why. As they point out, as this going through with Ron DeSantis, someone against this said, we've seen a lot of arrests in recent months for voting issues here in the state, but I have not seen guns drawn in that manner. That's what Neil Volz said. He's a deputy director of the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition, which works with people with felony convictions to help them get their voting rights back. Now, the videos, he said, were alarming and also heartbreaking. As a matter of fact, one cop showed that they didn't necessarily have to have guns drawn on folks, even though they had been convicted of, in this case, you'll find out the details of these murder cases and also sexual assault cases, because this guy somehow pulled it off without it, still as a henchman for this voting law. Let's watch more.
The sheriffs want to talk to you, sir.
Well, they said they were coming over here.
Okay.
Well, can I please go hang up my phone?
Okay, well, I'll hang it up for you. We'll take a walk back and then I'll hang it up for you. All right.
What's this about?
They just want to talk to you. I have to detain you until they get here. That's my instructions. So, appreciate your cooperation.
Why, are we going to jail?
Have a seat, sir. They'll tell me what to do from here. Did you vote?
Huh?
Did you vote?
Not this time, no.
Okay.
I can't vote anymore. They took that right away from me.
Well, you got $1,000 bond, sir.
What's the charge?
It was for something about false voting.
Oh, America, when you get pulled over, maybe arrested by the cops, and they'll ask you questions like, have you been drinking today, sir? Do you have any drugs on you? Maybe weapons? Did you vote? You know, the top 4 things that you can get arrested for in the country. As they asked him, think about how scary that is. This is that country where we're talking about we're leading in democracy. We're the best democracy in the world. As our law enforcement arrests people and asks them, did you vote? And by the way, did you hear the back end of that? You have $1,000 to pay. We're gonna get to why that's the case too. But what about Ronald Miller and Robert Wood? Why do they treat them like this? Miller and Wood are both convicted of second-degree murder more than 30 years ago, a crime that caused you to permanently lose your voting rights in Florida. They had both long completed their sentences for those charges and were not aware that they were permanently barred from voting. That's what their lawyers said. Here's part of that information. In 2018, Florida voters overwhelmingly approved a constitutional amendment that lifted the state's lifetime voting ban for people with felonies, except for those with murder or sex-related convictions. State officials have not offered a theory as to how Miller and Wood would have known that their second-degree murder convictions disqualified them from the amendment. Now, that amendment was changed to those parts and maybe people could feel more comfortable with who is voting. Now, the thing that people may want to feel comfortable doing so is letting these folks know that that's the case, because it's coming more and more clear that the whole point was to make sure that they didn't know, so that this could be one of those nice political moments for Ron DeSantis as he reads about how much of a bad ad he is. So a little bit more. The operation to arrest 19 people appears to have come together relatively quickly, just hours before DeSantis held that press conference announcing all the charges. One particular cop said, "They dumped this stuff on me last minute." One video shows that he was saying that as Miller sits there in handcuffs. And he also said, "I have to plan a 3-county operation in 4 hours." So the cops that even had to pull it off, maybe some of them didn't know the degree to which they had to do things, but also they did know how quickly they had to do those things to get everything done. I'm gonna get to how this law was also formed around making sure these folks didn't know, and then they could also get arrested and make Ron DeSantis look good. But first, let's talk about the gun issue and also how the law enforcement is used in this situation. Yes, what are your thoughts on this? Let's start with you.
Yeah, there are a few different angles to this story. For one, the GOP is already scaring everyday tax-paying Americans into thinking that armed IRS agents are gonna turn up at their doors. And meanwhile, this is what they're actually doing and enabling. And I know that this is Florida, and I know that this comes from DeSantis, but let's see if any members of the GOP actually condemn these armed arrests. And another angle here is that the men had criminal histories. The men who were arrested had criminal histories. They were convicted of crimes, but they all served their time, right? So now they should be able to live as free citizens, and they should have their voting rights restored. No taxation without representation, we know that, right? And then finally, why did the state issue these people voter registration cards if the state didn't want them to vote? If those men really weren't supposed to vote, why were they able to? They're just trying to scare people and discourage people from voting. That's all this is.
With guns out.
Yeah, man, those guns too. It just reminds me of our country's crisis of masculinity, right? It's like these cops don't feel like cops. They don't feel like big dogs if they're not, pounding these people's doors for voting wrongfully as convicted felons. That's one, and then two, like I've actually lived in a house where the cops came to get somebody, and they literally knock on the door in the morning and say, "Is such and such home? Tell them to come downstairs. We need to see him. We've come here to get them." They didn't bang. They didn't come in. They didn't flash guns. They literally knocked and said, "Is this person here? They gotta come with us," right? And so there's just a way to do this when you feel like you're dealing with a citizenry where it's like these cops don't have to act like there's some kind of special forces. There's a little bit too much Call of Duty happening over there. And then the last thing, JR. It's like millions of people in Florida, and they arrested 20 of them, and this guy thinks he's like making a dent in the voting populace. This is craziness.
By the way,
a press conference for 20 people.
Yo, I cut in the middle of that applause line that went for 7 to 10 seconds after he said, "We've got 20 people," which, by the way, you're gonna find out ended up being 19. Even worse. But think of how much tax dollars and energy and everything went into this operation, again, to make him look good. Now, this is where the next twist happens, though, is how was this law formed, and did these folks know? And did the state officials know that these folks didn't know? Prosecutors claim that Wood and Miller registered and voted knowing that they were ineligible to do so. But both men told investigators that they registered after being approached by canvassers ahead of the 2020 election, received a voter registration card in the mail, and had no idea that they were ineligible. Again, two of these folks, I think their convictions were over 30 years ago. The voter fraud charges against these two were separately dismissed last year. Two different Miami-Dade County judges ruled that the statewide prosecutor, which is handling the cases, did not have the authority to prosecute them. And a judge in Broward County dismissed another one of the 19 cases on similar grounds. Again, like I said, 19 cases. You know who else is confused by this? Maybe these folks should be arrested too. Because Florida Republicans then passed that law after the whole thing happened, and they're trying to crack down more. They required those with felonies to repay any money that they owed before they could vote again. That's, I think, where that $1,000 fine came from or something. The requirement made it extremely difficult for those with criminal history to figure out if they were eligible to vote, since the state does not have a centralized system to determine how much they owe. Last part about this, let's go through the last confusion. State officials have also struggled to verify the eligibility of those with felony convictions. Some of the 19 people charged were not notified of their ineligibility until 2022, years after they registered. State officials have yet to explain why it took them so long to flag ineligible people on the rolls. I think it might be taking them so long to figure this out because the answer is because Ron DeSantis' administration told us to do it now, and then we retroactively go back and punish people for the things that we've now implemented later on and say, how dare you, how dare you? But actually the point is from to stand there and go, look how tough on crime I am. Hey, how about those people that, those two folks whose convictions or arrests got flipped? Are you gonna have a press conference about that, Ron? You gonna talk about how that was actually meaningless and actually absolutely nothing and got you enough votes to win again? Is that the whole purpose for this whole thing? They're actors, and they're looking to position themselves in a way that they can then get reelected and stay the politicians that they are.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.